Of being a reading nation is Read Education Trust's Lizelle Langford, who's joining us now in studio. Good evening and welcome to The Full View. How do we get there?
It's going to be a step-by-step process. It's as difficult as saying go on a diet today and tomorrow you'll be slim, saying take a book in hand and just read. It starts at family level and it starts even before you're born. When you're hearing stories from the sharing around the family table, when you are being read to when you're in your bedroom just before you go to bed, when you see your parents, when you see your aunts, when you see your uncles all reading, that's when that culture starts growing. But it's going to be slow going. It's not going to happen overnight.
And that's the other dynamic about it, is that, for instance, if you look at the social injustice that the country currently faces, as well as the levels of inequality, and how, for instance, someone may argue that you'd find that a parent may be stuck in traffic, may be stuck in a train that is stuck somewhere on one line, that the parent gets home late, doesn't have time to even look over the kids' homework, doesn't even have time to read. So how do you then counter that in, considering that you may just have weekends available?
If you look around you, text is all around you. So when you're stuck in traffic, your children might be at home, but they will be seeing something. And I think it's making sure that you also don't just think reading is reading a physical book. Reading starts at storytelling. So who can tell a story to the children, even though they talk to each other? That's the beginning of making sure that they're hearing words, that they're building vocabulary, and that they're starting to get curious about wanting to know more. And I think if the whole family gets that dynamic together of let's find out more, we find it out by asking the questions, by finding the book if we can, and there you go to where do we get access to books.
Yeah, I remember growing up as probably like 6 or 5 years old, where we were all encouraged to go to a library, all had our little library book, cards. Sometimes you'd lose your library card, but anyway, you were in a library. And what I'm finding now is that you don't really find that drive, even from parents, to encourage the kids to go to a public library.
Yes, and we do have beautiful public libraries all over. They're not that plentiful, but there again, we're putting a lot of responsibility on communities to start their own kind of reading clubs, to start sharing the books that they have, to make sure that they establish their own community libraries. We always look at someone else to supply us with the things that we need so that we can build this culture. But we have to start with what we can do. There's free little libraries popping up all over, and people share the books that they have. The same can be done at schools. There's classroom libraries instead of central libraries. So there's really lots of options, but people will have to step up to the plate and start saying, I'm going to be the one to do it, and I'm not just going to wait for it to be done and then participate in that.
There's actually a report that I saw from the Progress International Reading Literacy Study, PIRLS, indicating that around 78% of grade 4s cannot read for meaning. But then they point out something which was quite interesting for me, because the focus has been reading for meaning, but reading in your home language, and encouraging kids to read in their home languages. And what they found is that when it comes to kids reading in their home languages, especially those who read in indigenous languages, is that the child struggles to read for meaning. One of the, and it's a complex situation, it's not just because of, but one of the things, when you start to read for meaning, it means that you understand the vocabulary word that you're faced with, and in order to understand it, somebody should have taught you this word means this, and then you should have access to books in your home language, so that when you're confronted with a word that you don't know, you would be able to make meaning of it because you've seen so many other words. And we actually just don't have enough home language children's books to do that. Most of our children will probably in a home language have 5 or 6 different home language books, and if you go to some of our minority languages like Sepedi, even less. So I know that the only way to counteract that is where's more home language books and make it more available. That again is a question of economics, because somebody has to write them, somebody has to publish them, somebody has to buy them. And if you look at the new coalition, the Reading Coalition policy that's out there, they're going to start focus
on a home language.
Yeah.
And that in itself is a process of a decade, which means that what happens to the other home languages? So it's not an easy solvable problem. But again, they are encouraging learners to do their own writing in their home language. So the older learners can write something that younger learners can read.
What about the parent? What about the parent who is illiterate? How does a parent who can't read nor write go about teach their child to read and write?
I go back to saying storytelling is the first steps of writing a book. We can all tell a story, and lots of our African home language speakers have wonderful African stories to tell, and start there. The understanding and meaning becomes from hearing the words, from hearing the language, from being comfortable with the language. You don't have to be literate, be able to read to tell that story. You don't have to be literate to be able to explain the meaning. And the more you do that, the more you open the world for the learner, for the child to actually explore on its own.
I was actually thinking while prepping for this interview that here at the SABC we're quite fortunate because we have a library and a fully fledged library, by the way, very beautiful, lots and lots of books. And listening into what the President was saying earlier on about cooperation between the private sector as well, I wonder then from the private sector side, could the private sector also come on board and encourage its employees to also start reading?
There's lots of initiatives happening, and private sector's doing their part, NGOs doing something, government is doing something. And from Reed's side, we're distributing free libraries. We're putting up free libraries in communities, and there's somebody that replenishes the boxes. People can take the books. We are making reading boxes that we distribute to schools across South Africa, and that is sponsored by a donor. There's lots of redistribution happening in libraries across the schools in our country, and that is corporates putting in their efforts. So all the little bits and pieces are making a difference. I think people just need to know where to go to actually say, how can I give my contribution? And Reed will put up its hand to say, come to us and tell us what it is that you would like to contribute, and we would be able to channel that further. And
I've heard before someone arguing that there's value, income value attached to ability to read and write.
Can you just imagine not being able to make meaning of any of the text that you come across as you grow older? Obviously, it makes you a more economically viable citizen if you are able to interrogate, to critically think about what you're reading, to innovate, to take from this is what is now and this could be if I do this. And that is all the ability to interpret what you are reading. So we are doing our children a huge injustice by not encouraging that reading, but not pushing them further into thinking more critically about what they're reading.
Lizelle, just quickly on, for instance, children who suffer from dyslexia, and this is something that some parents don't even pick up, and they'd say that the child is, they use derogatory terms, child is stupid, you are not like your brother, why are you this way? How do a parent who has a child, probably not knowing that this child may be dyslexic, go about this?
The best way is always to go back to the school. A teacher is a professional that should know that if the methods I'm using to teach reading is not helping X or Y, there must be another reason. And from the school to go back to the department to channel it into the right directions, because dyslexia is something that with the right tutoring and the right approach can be helped. And it's always best to first ask the question. Parent need to ask teacher what is going on, because we see there's a problem. For those who are working, encouraging them how to find time to read, what would you say? I would say you can read on anything. You can read on your phone, you can read on a tablet, and if you can take that 5 or 10 minutes when you're just quickly resting from what you're thinking about in work, then you're reading and you're joining the program. Lizelle, thank you so much for your time. That was Lizelle Langford of Reed Education.